Alright, you all have the handout that I gave you, and I was just made aware of the fact that there is an error in the handout. Now, there's not line numbers on here, but it's down in line 147. It's under the function other charges. That should say, if you look on your screen, on the screen here, that should say labor hours, not label hours. Alright? So if you want to fix that on yours, that would be a good thing. I put a hard copy of it out there on the, or electronic copy out there also. I'll try to, in fact, I should just grab that one and fix it. And thank you, Amanda, for finding that. Hopefully that's the only thing that's wrong. Oh, there's more up here. Well, it wasn't on purpose. Here's one. Alright, so the one that's out there on the system on the P drive has now been fixed. Yeah, what happened was I rewrote this 3 or 4 times, so there's probably some stuff in there that's going to have to be fixed up. Alright. And I mentioned in class, or I mentioned the other earlier sometime, I don't know. But for the most part, the program works. So what we're going to do is go over the logic that's in it. Alright. And if you remember, the idea behind this, if I go back to the P drive one last time, this was supposed to be what the interface looked like. We had one field set for routine services, which had these 7 things in there. We had one field set for the non-routine services, which had the 2 things in there. Then a calculate charges button and an exit button. And as you can see, if you take a look here, it is far from perfect. I'll definitely admit that. But that said, I may have turned off XAMPP. I want to double check and see if I did or not. Nope, I didn't. Good. So that's what it looks like on here. Alright. Again, pretty similar to what you see. It's not exactly the same. I tried to implement a clear form instead of an exit button, because exit was just basically an exit, but I had problems with it. So you can see that right now, as an example, if I go and take everything that's in there and have nothing, literally have nothing in there. Alright, I calculate the charges. As you'd guess, the bill is nothing. Alright, don't worry about this message. I got to fix that too, but that's not a big thing. And as I start adding things, so if oil change, boom, it pops up, it's $26. Oil and lube should be $44, and it is. Add the radiator, should be $74, and it is. Add the transmission flush, and it should be $154, and it is. The inspection, 15, so it should be $169, and it is. The muffler replacement, 100, so it should be $269, and it is. The tire rotation, 20, so it should be $289, and it is. So I think you can see, looking at that, that stuff functions okay. All right. Parts charges, $100, and if I add that, all right, well, that's good because it worked before and it's not working now. All right. And labor charges, $10, or 10 hours of labor at $20 an hour. All right, that worked. All right. In fact, so did this, but I don't know why it had to have something else in there. So if I add all these up, I get $289. All right, if I add the $100, that's $389. and then $10 of labor at $20 an hour is $200 more, so that's $589. So in other words, it works. Okay? It's not fantastic by any means. I worked on it, didn't have as much time to spend on it as I'd like. If you notice, this is the sole CSS in here, as I made sure that I wanted, if there were going to be any errors, I wanted them to be red and bold. And the field set that's in here, I set the first one to 50% of the screen and the second one to 75% so that the message would show. And that's literally it for CSS. I tried to get the form to clear using jQuery. I had problems with it, but I just left this in here, all right, which added jQuery. Okay? So let's look at the PHP. Am I right in assuming that when you look at lines 28 through 36, those 9 or so lines, if everybody would look on the screen right here, am I right in assuming that everybody in this class understands those? Those are just constants. All right, those are the costs. The last 7 things that are in there are the costs for the different types of routine services that you can get. All right, the labor rate is 20 bucks an hour. The tax rate is 6%. So any questions on any of that? That makes sense. Okay. All right. And there may be other errors in here. As I find them, I'll fix them and go put a new version of it out. But the idea was, if there were errors that were found in either of these 2 fields here, the parts charges or the hours of labor, if there were errors in either one of them, that's what this was, those variables there were going to hold. All right. We had to figure out, this is what we were told in the specs, to add up the lube and the oil and put that into a variable, or basically call a routine that was called oil lube charges. Add the transmission flush and the radiator flush, and I put that into the flush charges. Add the miscellaneous, which are the other 3 things, the tire rotation, the inspection, and the muffler replacement. All right, so add those 3 things together, and I put them in the miscellaneous charges. Other charges were basically what they end up, or what they're supposed to end up being, are parts and labor. All right, and the tax also, which is supposed to be 6%. Again, there's some, like I said, there's some problems with it. Then after I figure out the oil lube charges, the flush charges, the miscellaneous charges, the other charges, the tax charges, and the total charges, we pass all of those together into another function called total charges, and then when that comes back, we echo out the bill. Does all that make sense as far as what's going on in there? Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody that doesn't make sense to? All right. So when we look in here, here's the first one. This is the whole function is shown right here. I can fit all of it. I'm going to move it up a little bit. There. On the screen. So what I'm saying is the is set basically means, was that thing checked? If it's checked, that means that you want an oil change. So if it's checked, you want to add 26, which is what the value of the constant oil change is. All right, and we set oil to that. I didn't even really have to do that, but it's a way of doing it. Otherwise, I set it to 0. All right, so if it was set, this is just a checkbox, so I don't have to check anything for non-numeric or anything. If it's checked, I want to add 26. Otherwise, I'm adding 0. And then I do the same thing for the lube job, and I'm going to add these together. So it's going to be one of 4 things. It's going to be 26 plus 18, 0 plus 18, all right, 26 plus 0, or 0 plus 0. Does that make sense? Those are the 4 possibilities. Either you wanted an oil change and no lube job, you wanted a lube job and no oil change, you wanted both, or you wanted neither. And you could raise your hand and go, wait a minute, Jeff, why would somebody get an oil change without getting, I don't care. All right. So again, when we get done with this, this is going to equal one of 4 values right there in line 85. It's either going to equal 26 because you wanted an oil change, but you didn't want a lube job. Or it's going to equal 44 because you wanted an oil change plus a lube job. Or it's going to equal 18 because you wanted a lube job but no oil change. Or it's going to equal 0 because you wanted neither of them. All that makes sense. Yeah? Okay. So that's the first one. Then we do a similar thing for the flushes. Okay? So again, the transmission flush, I don't remember what these costs are. I don't care really. but either you want a radiator flush and a transmission flush, or you want one or the other, or you want neither. So we're doing the exact same thing here. At first, and just so you know, because like I said, there's some mistakes in here. At first, I was going to try to write this as one function and just pass stuff to it. It got to be way too cumbersome to do it like that. So I had stuff in here and I removed it. I've got 3 or 4 versions of this on my own C drive here, and this is the way I decided to do it. Then we do the same thing with the miscellaneous charges. Now, since there's 3 of them, there's more combinations. You could have all 3, you could have none of them, or any combination of 1 or 2. Does that make sense? All right. So we're doing the same exact thing. So when we get down to right here, we have figured out everything that's in here. Does that make sense? All right. So again, either in the worst case, that's 0 in the worst case for Joe's. All right, so notice it's 300, 100 from there and 200 from there. All right, in the best case for Joe's, that's 289 more than that, which is what that shows. So technically, if you go in there and you ask for the works and you imagine that the most hours of labor you'll have are 10, it's going to cost you 589 bucks. All right? So that's the first part. That's the routine services. Then we've got to go down and look at the non-routine services. All right? So can somebody tell me, what does that mean? Putting that global word in there, what does that mean? Well, you're on the right track. When you say something is global like that, what that means is it's been defined outside of any function, which means it's been defined out here. If I did not say global before I created these, so down here, if we did not have the global and we started to just use parts charges, error, etc., it'd create brand new variables because I'm inside of a function. All right? These are local variables, parts charges and labor hours, all right, which used to be called label hours, unfortunately, but it was. So then I wanted to come in here and I used the example that we went over last time, the example that I showed you and the one that we, as an example. So I said, okay, trim whatever was in parts charges. So that line right there, 150, that you see semi in gray there, that says take this and trim it, just in case the person put in blanks, before, after, or just blanks, period. All right, so that's what we're telling them to do right there in the gray. And then I'm saying if it's equal to nothing, if there's nothing there, I wanted to set the error to parts charges field cannot be blank. All right, there are different ways in PHP that you can set something and check it for being set or not set. You can say like this, if it's equal to double quote, there should really be a space there, but it still works fine without it. So I can say that. I can say if it's not set, I can say if it equals double quote, instead of single quote. There's even other ways. There's an empty function that you can use. The problem is with some of the PHP functions, all right, if you put a 0 in there, it considers it to not be set. Did you everybody hear what I said? If you put a 0 in when you check certain fields, 0 is like the empty string with some of these functions. All right? So I did it like this. So in other words, you trim this. If there's nothing in there whatsoever after you trim it, ideally what that would have said in parts charges error is parts charges field cannot be blank. Ideally, that's what it would have said. Then I return, because there's no sense in going on because there's no parts charges, and technically that was considered an error situation. All right. If you put something non-numeric in there, it should come back and say, and that you're right. This is where Amanda found this right there, where that this shouldn't say error. They should say parts charges error there and there. All right. Hopefully that's the rest of the errors. All right. So if it's empty, say that it can't be blank and return. If it's non-numeric, say it must be numeric and return. If it's less than 0, say it must be greater than or equal to 0 and return. Does all that make sense? And then we do the same kind of thing for the labor, but it's hours. And again, No excuse, but I'm just telling you the truth. The reason that those mistakes are in there because originally I wrote that as one function, and it wasn't working right. So I broke it. I'm sorry, I wrote it at two. I wrote it where this right here, after we did all these, I called another function that was doing validation. And then I called almost the same function here to do validation. And it just wasn't giving me back anything. All right. And when I moved that stuff back, unfortunately, I didn't change everything from error to parts charges error or labor charges error or whatever. The thing to realize when you're doing this, notice that says labor hours and that says labor charges. They're two different things. Because labor hours are the 10 hours that you might say you're doing of labor, and labor charges is 10 times 20, which is the rate, or $200. All right? So the thing you were not supposed to leave blank or non-numeric or less than 0, that was labor hours. All right? And if you did all that, and basically, all right, so if none of that was true, then you should have come in here and done this. Labor charges, which were the labor hours, times the labor rate. Then we should have returned parts charges. And the only way we would have gotten down here would have been if that part charge that's down here before was numeric and positive. So we add those two together, we return them, and that gets stuffed into right there, the other charges. All right. Then we've got the tax, and that doesn't appear to be working either. So let's take a look at the tax and see what that said. All right. Again, I tried to keep these things fairly small, these functions. Tax is only on parts. All right. So global parts charges. All right. If the parts charges were 0, there are no taxes. You can't pay any taxes when you didn't buy anything. Otherwise, the tax charge, and I wonder if that should be tax charges. So let's look. No, I'm creating it down here. So it's fine that it's tax charge. All right. So otherwise, the tax charge should be parts charges, whatever you passed in, all right, whatever it is globally, times the tax rate, which should have been 6%. And then we try to return that. That doesn't appear to be working, though. Either that or it's not being added, which very well could be the problem, too. All right. And then finally, you take all that good stuff that you've got in here, you pass it down here, and all I did was add each one together and return the sum of all that. What's going on there? Does that make sense? Everybody, does that make sense? As far as what we're trying to do. Maybe not every line of PHP, but what we're trying to do there, does that make sense? All right, then let's look at the HTML that goes along with it. Remember, this at the beginning said, remember what this line means. This is the most important part of the semester thus far, is the next 15 seconds. That line that's in gray means, did you press, all right, did you press the submit button? That's what we're checking there. If you did, you want to do all this stuff. If you didn't, you're going to come down there and you're going to do this. That's going to just show the form. All right. I gave the form a name because, again, I tried to use JavaScript and jQuery to reset it. Called it Joe's Auto Form. Said it was being posted. This said post the thing back to itself. All right. This was the first field set that started here, and it went, it went all the way down to here, and that's the second field set that started here, and it went all the way down to there. All right. So as we look in here, here's the first field set. Again, I was having a problem getting the stuff that was in the checkboxes to be sticky. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. So I went to Stack Overflow, and I tried to see if anybody else had the same problem. Yes, they did. And I read quite a few of them. And I tried to implement a few of them. This is the one that I settled on. All right. And what it didn't do what I thought it would do, but this says if this is set, then make sure that you echo checked. So in other words, in English, means if it's checked, you want to make sure that it stays checked. Does that make sense? But it appears as that when I did that, even when I clicked the clear button when I had it working, it checked everything all the time. Okay, and I did this every time. So it's done here for the oil change, here for the lube job, here for the radiator flush, here for the transmission flush, here's for the inspection, here's for the muffler replacement, here's for the tire rotation. Does all that make sense? So the idea was that HTML that's right there was designed to build this and to try to keep it sticky. Okay? And then what's left, which we'll talk about in just a minute, was designed to build this down here and to keep that sticky. All right, because it could be if I made a mistake, and right now it's not even catching mistakes. It can't be blank. That's the wrong mistake. It's the wrong error. Same with this. See what? But it's keeping the values all in there. That's what I'm trying to show you. All right. So when we look at what's left here, that's in the second field set. Again, this is all of the non-routine charges right in there. I just put it in a table so it would line up. I know it's a little cheesy. I probably should have used CSS, but I didn't. All right. And I'm trying to do the same thing in here. If it's set, echo it. Otherwise, echo 0. If it's set, echo it. Otherwise, echo 0. And if there are any errors, use span tags to try to have them print out in red. So is what's going on there makes sense? All right, then let's go back. Teresa had asked this question before, and I'm going to try to answer it right now. So, your original homework from what was in there originally, okay? There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems, right? Okay. So, number 2 we did as a class. I gave you hard copies of those. All right? And I said, you don't have to do that. I mean, I gave you the hard copy. If you want to key it in, that's fine. If you think it'll help you, fine, but you don't have to. Now, we just did number 4. So we've done as a class or separately or whatever, approximately 40% of what was assigned. All right? I'm still expecting you to do this one, that test one. All right? And I'm still rather expecting you to at least try the prime number one. If you want to do the Joes and try to fix what I've done, great. If you say I don't have time, then don't. So what I'm saying is the revised assignment then is to do number 1, which is to fix that form that we worked on in class. Number 3, which is the prime number. And number 5, which is that future value. Does all that make sense? All right. Now, this is what I'm going to do because I ended up lecturing during some of the time when I told you you'd have lab. All right. Granted, it was only a half an hour today, etc. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the rest of the period today lab, and I'm going to make next Monday lab, or next Tuesday. Thursday was going to be lab anyway. All right. So you've got lab the rest of the period today, lab Thursday, and you'll have lab next Tuesday. Starting next Thursday, a week from Thursday, which is like the 2nd, 3rd, what is it? The 2nd. So on October 2nd, I will be lecturing on chapters 8 and 9. All right? After we get done with 8 and 9, there's only a couple more chapters left in the entire book. All right? So I'm going to give you another assignment. I will tell you right now, just so you're aware of this, I'll tell you right now for sure what one of those other assignments will be. And that is, you will be responsible for taking this, making it work, and then instead of having, let me get all that junk out of there, instead of having it say 289 like this on the top of the page, when you click calculate, what I'm going to want to have happen, and we haven't talked about this yet, so that's why I want to assign it yet, but you'll use session variables, and you will go to another page, and I want you to literally create a bill for them that has every single thing that they were charged for, what the charges were, and the total. Does that make sense? So you've got a good start on that right here, but you'll have to fix it up. All right? And there'll probably be one other problem, and that'll be it for your next assignment. right. Then when we get done with that, we're going to finish up whatever's in the book. Then we're going to write a site as a class. That'll be somewhere around week 10. I don't know exactly when, but somewhere. We'll spend 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to write a really simple e-commerce type of site as a class. When I say real simple, it will be. I'm not going to worry about it being pretty. I'm just going to worry about it being functional. And we're going to spend 1, 2, or 3 weeks, depending on how much time we need. Let's say worst case, we spend 3 weeks on it. Okay? That means weeks 10, 11, and 12, we'll spend working on that. That means you've got 5 weeks left to pretty it up, put your own touches on it, and probably add just a little bit more functionality than we will do in class. By that time, what we will have done is we will have brought MySQL databases in. We're going to have a database that we're going to use for this. All right? And you're going to see how to hook MySQL and PHP up together. All right? Questions on that? So again, last time. The actual assignment that's due October 9th, Thursday, October 9th, will be numbers 1, which says go back and fix that thing that we worked on in class. 3, which is a prime number, so that one you're doing all by yourself. And 5, which is the present value. All right? And what I'm going to do, Amanda, for you, you're not in that class, but in the ASP.NET class, they've worked on a program that has all the calculations for the prime number. I'll give you that. I'll run you off the hard copy of that so you have it. And I don't think that between giving you today, Thursday, next Tuesday, and already giving you a lab period, you should be able to finish that. All right? You will be, this is week, what, 6 now, I think? I think we're in week 6. So 3 weeks from Thursday, you're going to be doing course evaluations. I'm leaving the room. Be brutal. You think the book sucks? Put that down. You think the instructor sucks? Put that down. You got ways to help the instructor? Put that down. If you want to be like Travis and tell me from now on I don't use the number 2 for anything, I go right from 1 to 3, put that down. All right, whatever you want. All right, so that's all that I had.